young people giving adults advice with Leonie Tillman.
In this episode, I interview a young person who's somebody I've worked with for quite a while at the Sydney Startup Hub. He's somebody that's finishing his studies. He's also working in business, and I know that he does some work in the arts as well. That kind of open-mindedness, humility, and willingness to have a conversation with as many different people as possible is someone I find incredibly inspiring. But I'll let him introduce himself.
So my name is Anthony. I'm 23 years old. I'm at university at UNSW. I'm studying Mechatronics Engineering, hopefully graduating by the end of the year.
Fantastic.
And also work part-time on the side, so very busy.
Yeah. So what's your biggest passion in all of that?
For me, I genuinely love building things and making things. So I think my end goal, like the reason why I did engineering, was purely to make good things that I can give to people and show people like and sort of inspire people with what you can do with your hands or with your mind. And yeah, that's the biggest thing. So hopefully, when I get out of there, I'll do some meaningful work. I'm currently working at a medical place, which is very cool. So it's good to put my sort of engineering skills that could help to use that could actually help people.
Oh, right. What's that about?
Yeah. So I work at a new the startup building defibrillators. So we've designed a sort of really compact defibrillator that's a lot cheaper than the current ones in the market. So the idea is to get as many defibrillators out there as possible, so can help solve the problem of people dying from heart attacks and sort of prevent that.
Wow, that's incredible. That makes me think of Packer, who put them all in the ambulances after he'd had a heart attack.
Yeah, exactly. So this same sort of aspect. One of the founders, his wife, had a heart attack at home, and he thought to himself, why is it so difficult to get defibrillators? And he looked around, the prices were really super expensive. So he got together with some other really smart people and developed the defibrillator they're working on at the moment. So it's very cool.
Wow. So is that the idea that people would have them in their homes?
Yeah, homes, cars, at sporting events. Because I think the current laws at the moment is one defibrillator per building. So the idea is to have it everywhere. So then it becomes like a common thing, almost like a fire extinguisher.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
I know you're working on some other pretty amazing projects too.
Yeah. Like if you know me personally, I have like a lot of different projects I work on I get bored if I don't keep my hands busy. So we're using AI to pretty much build an advertising engine for physical stores. So the idea is to help improve customer experience within stores. So by basically collecting data and applying into a machine learning algorithm, we can help like store owners improve their sales and things like that. It's a little bit different to medical work, but it's fairly interesting seeing how you can actually how you can apply data into in the real world. I also work on, like, another side project of mine is building drones. So currently with a few university mates, we're building drones to help improve search and rescue applications, farming and agriculture. So basically with that is we're building sort of this long range a drone that you can pretty much pack on like image sensors or crop sprayers, things like that. Because like we found currently in Australia, there's not much. When we spoke to a lot of people in the area, particularly in agriculture, a lot of the current drones don't make the distances that are required in farmland. So we sort of built a medium to long range style drone that can probably survey up to about, I think, 30 or 40 hectares. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. We've got together 5 years ago and just been sort of chipping away at it. So it's been fun. sort of like more of a side project that we sort of use to learn new things rather than a business.
So how did you get into doing something like that?
So I've always been hands-on because thanks to my dad, because I think he taught me how to solder before I could write. So I've always been building. Like one of my favorite hobbies is building model aircraft and helicopters and RC cars. So when I was looking around to what to do for like what you need to go into, I did a early entry type thing at UNSW. So you can go in if you show off like cool projects you've done, and you talk to the head of school, and you do an interview instead of using your HSC marks if you wanted to, if you, for example, didn't get the right sort of ATAR or right sort of ATAR to get into uni. When I did my interview, I was telling all this like cool stuff I built and like my background story of like how I got why I got into engineering, and he introduced me to a club at the uni called Create. Through there, because like I came from a school which really didn't have any sort of hands-on technical STEM stuff. It was more of an arts sports school. That's what the sort of focus was on. So when I got to uni, so I got into UNSW and went to check out the club. I was like sort of amazed at all the cool stuff all these people were doing. So from there, I bumped into a few people who were actually running the drone club at UNSW. And then from there, got more involved, worked on a few projects with them. So we built stuff for a challenge in Queensland called the Medical Express Challenge, which was designing real high endurance drones for medical usage. The idea was to fly about 30 kilometers away, land, pick up a blood sample, then fly back home, all completely autonomous. And yeah, from there, some of the guys graduated. I took on the role of like head of that project, and then got together a few of my mates I met through uni, and then went from there. So we started building more and more and learning more and more. And then we started getting contacts within universities, so like research lecturers got to know us a bit more. We started doing a little bit more work with researchers and building stuff for them. And here we are today. So like at the moment, we're working with a research lecturer on building like a drone for his new. I can't say too much about it, but it's a new sort of agricultural product that he's working on. So we're building the test jig for him, and we're working for alongside him and a company to sort of test out his new product.
That's incredible. I guess what I'm taking from that is that you are doing things that you really enjoy, that you've enjoyed since you were a kid. Now you're doing them in an academic environment. And I also know that you do some work in the arts as well. So it's almost like the financial aspect isn't that important to you, would you say?
Not at all. I think it was my dad who told me, I think it's my dad, is like, you should do stuff that you really enjoy, and like money will come later.
Yeah.
And I know that's sort of a big thing with other individuals say the same thing too. It's like that's the sort of the secret of enjoying your work, because I know a lot of people come up to me and go like why do you enjoy engineering so much, or you seem like you really love your work. And it's like, yeah, because I don't see the financial aspect of it. Like, yeah, you do make a lot of money in this, especially in the tech field, but it's not my thing. It's more so I want to do something that doesn't make me bored, and also has some sort of impact that helps sort of gives something back to people in some form, where it's like building new technology that helps people, or just doing like interesting, like for example, doing art projects is like one of my favorites, because particularly because I always wanted to link sort of art engineering together, because I always thought those two things are sort of polar opposites. But seeing people interact with your art project and putting a smile on their face and sparking their curiosity, that's like makes me really happy, because it's just really nice to see people getting some enjoyment out of your work you do.
Yeah,
I think that's valuable.
Absolutely. I come from an arts background and then moved into business, and as you know, Anthony and I know each other from the tech startup hub in Sydney. And I'm not a techie. I'm in the startup world doing communication. So it is an interesting world coming from the arts and being in such a business space and interacting with so many tech people. I think there is a real lack of communication between those two worlds. I'm also think that's fascinating, and how there's almost animosity between them much of the time.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Particularly in the it's very strange. Like there's a big divide between arts and technology, but yet when you actually mix it together, you build like such amazing things from it. Like especially when you with communication too. You know, I know for a fact that engineers like ourselves struggle to communicate sometimes. So when you have that link, you can with the art sector and communicators, you can build something quite amazing out of it when both sides work together.
Yeah, for sure. And how do you think you learned that? I mean, you said you went to a school that had a bit of an arts focus, more a humanities focus, but do you think that's where you learned it, or where did that come from?
I think it was just from interacting with various people. So when I was at uni as well, a few years ago at uni, I was working on a bunch of I was working on a project, basically a Vivid Sydney installation with the university. And so with that project, we had a mix of, what we designed it to be was to link the main campus, so the campus where the engineering department is, and the art and design campus up in Paddington. So the idea with that project was to bring a bridge across those two sectors. So when we started to interact with artists, like when we would design something, we would design it very technical, like there was no story behind it. So it would be like, how would we brainstorm would be, why don't we build this, for example, tree and then add LEDs onto it. Yet when the artist came along to brainstorm, they would create a story first. And that's where I sort of saw it. I was like, that's probably the most, like, when you can create a story and bring in the technical aspect behind that story, you can make something new. And that sort of clicked in my head, I think. Like in high school, I think I despised like the art side because there was no mixture of technology. It was all about the story. So when I would like, for example, in art class, I would always put a technical twist to my art projects. And I think one of my art teachers, like a few of my previous art teachers, didn't really care about it too much, but one of my art teachers sort of saw it and like, oh, this is really cool. So like, I kind of started brewing there. And then when I got into university and started working with people in the art sector, it's like, yeah, there should definitely be more of a mix here, and connection between both sides.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think that education aspect is so important, but it's making me think also about young people and adults interacting. And you're saying that a lot of people didn't see the potential in that or didn't validate it as a piece of art. But if you think, if we sort of broaden out from that idea and think about the sort of journey from young person through to adulthood, what do you think needs to be communicated between those two groups?
I think there needs to be like a two-way street of listening and discussion. So what I see missing between adults and children, like just personally, is both sides think they know better than each other, rather than actually listening to both sides, like having a discussion between like both parties having a discussion and understanding, okay, this is the points I put forward, this is the points I forward. What points can we both agree on and then move forward with? It's like with parents and children, you'll notice that with parents who tend to listen to their children, they would have a better relationship. So like if you as a parent or as an adult give a child a chance to speak and say their words, you'll notice that they'll have a different type of respect for you, because they know that you're willing to listen, so to what they have to say, and it means they'll be willing to listen to what you have to say. So it's like that sort of two-way street type communication.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. And I'm thinking also of so many things going on in my mind right now, but I'm also thinking, I'm aware that you have a different cultural heritage as well. How much of that do you think comes into it, having from different cultural perspectives and how people interact with parents?
Yeah. So for me, like with my parents, so my dad grew up overseas. He had so my background heritage is Middle Eastern, so of course it's that whole your parents are strict and they won't let you do things. But my mum, on the other hand, she grew up majority of her time in the USA. So when I can sort of see that with with my parents. So like my dad would be more strict towards things, and he has more of a more strict ideas, whereas my mum is a bit more flexible. So well, as a kid, what I used to do is I used to try out, like, whenever I do something wrong, or if I was trying to negotiate something, I would first test it on my mum, because my mum would allow for that. She would listen to me, I would listen to her, and we'll have that discussion, and then I'll go with my dad. So once I have my arguments built up, I can go with my dad and discuss it with him. Because I knew with my dad, it's a lot more harder to do, because he's less willing to listen, because it's more so it's like he's the parent, I'm the child, so he would know better. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, because it was good, because it kept me in line. Because like it's like, but it was good to have that the discussion point, because I used to love to argue. Like my parents almost thought I was going to be a lawyer rather than an engineer. But I think nowadays, especially when I'm a lot older, my dad's more willing to like listen to my side of things too. But I think that's because I've worn him out over the years. So eventually it's become now, it's like it's better off to have a discussion rather than to be strict to one certain idea.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like you've got the perfect balance between the two, because yeah, I mean, how do you find that balance between, I could imagine, I'm not a parent, but I could imagine
Yeah.
that being a really difficult line to strike, and it sounds like you just had it naturally with your family.
Um, I think it's just more so. It's like when you have, I think with old things, you eventually learn how to do it. It's like my parents were young, so they didn't have the experience either when they had a kid too. So I think they were my age now when they had their first child. Um, of course, it comes with a learning experience. So like, of course, my dad learned from how to parent from his parents. And likewise, it was like with my mum, on the other hand, she probably learned from, because she was the oldest in her family, so she was also taking care of like her brothers and sisters when she was younger. Well, my grandparents used to work, so she had a bit more of a like sort of a bit more uh, like sort of more flexibility with her parenting style. Um, so yeah, it's I think I'm kind of lucky that I had a good sort of mix of, like, I had either side of parenting, so I had flexibility and um as well as a mixture of strictness, which I think is good, because you can develop, I think, for a child as well, as like if you can learn discipline as well as learning how to discuss and formulate your ideas, it is very helpful in your sort of, as you grow up and grow older, because you learn how to negotiate, but you also know the boundaries of discipline.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that sounds apt. I agree. What about I mean, you are an adult now, but what
Yeah.
do you want from adults or people who are your superiors, I guess, people who are older than you? What do you want from them?
um I think the greatest thing is listening to uh, new ideas and expanding sort of your mindset. Because I know I was chatting to a friend of mine yesterday about like just for example with like the protests and things happening here, and like why do people like there's like that idea of people do get stuck in their own values, which is quite dangerous, because if you get stuck in your own values, you never really progress, because you're not constantly learning or constantly educating yourself on sort of what's happening around you. Um, so I see this a lot, just for example, in the tech sector, especially in when working in startups, or the reason why I kind of work in startups is purely around the fact that there's always that idea of challenging the norm and challenging ideas. And that's why I'll never get to work in the corporate sector, just because it's so stuck within their values. So for me, it's basically on the idea of constantly learning, constantly challenging your own values, and constantly like seeking change and seeking change as well. So what I would love for, like, for example, for people older than myself, is to sort of listen to new ideas, but also don't be afraid to stick by your ideas, but learn how to argue your ideas for like why they seem the most correct for that circumstance. Because you don't want to constantly change and not have you don't want to throw away values completely, but you just want to work on them and improve them, because everyone's different. Everyone has their own sort of ideas of how things should work. But if you learn how to actually argue, or how to argue your values properly, it helps people who are trying to learn from you understand why you believe that way, and then they can sort of help improve, sort of build on their values that they think about. So I think that's sort of like, so like sharing that idea of educating and building upon and moving forward, I think is what people should be like. People older than me should be looking into.
Yeah, sounds like you would have been great in the debate team at uni or school.
The funny thing is, I actually never enjoyed it.
Oh, but you did it, did you? You just did it reluctantly.
No, I never had interest in it. I think I only learned that I enjoyed debating later on. It's like I used to enjoy mathematics. I hated things like English, but like now when I grew, like just growing up a bit more, and like I understand what my teachers were saying, especially in English. Like I think it really clicked with me was my Year 12 teacher. She worked out. This is where it comes to sort of building upon your values and building upon sort of constantly learning about how you should approach things and changing your values. So she picked up, particularly with my English class, that we're all very math based. Like we love science. A lot of us did like all three sciences plus design courses, or like very technical courses. So she sat down with each student and asked them, like, what's your favorite subject? What do you enjoy about those subjects? And then she started formulating like she sort of did personalized like methodology for us, like how do we approach English with our sort of backgrounds. And that's where I sort of picked up on, I think it also comes back to the arts thing too. That's where I sort of picked up on everything sort of linked together. Like in English, there's a science to formulating your argument in an essay. In arts, of course, there's a technical background to expressing your ideas. And yeah, so I think that's, going back to your previous question, I think that's where it's kind of picked up, or I picked up on that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think school is an interesting one. And I'm just thinking back to when I understood that, arguing was a good thing. I think similarly, my mother thought I think I was going to become a lawyer as well, because I was probably good at arguing. But I remember I was probably about 24 or 5, I think, before I understood how to debate a point. I think I was a bit of a late developer. It's not to say that I didn't, argue with people, but I think I learnt the value of debating ideas. And I can distinctly remember the situation when I was saying about a friend, we were hanging out with his friends and they were all having these really lively debates. And I said, wow, I could never discuss like that. I was very aware of being silent and not putting my thoughts forward. And I said, they all know so much. And he laughed. He said, they don't know anything. We're all just throwing ideas around. Nobody really had any knowledge. And I thought, oh, that was that aha moment where suddenly it all fell into place. I think things changed from that point.
Yeah, and I also think, like for me, it was just mainly I think politics was the one that got me into expressing my ideas a bit more. So when I was in high school, like I wasn't really sort of into it because I went to a school which was kindergarten to year 12, so I didn't really sort of venture out to just because in my area there wasn't very much schools around, so and the schools that were around were severely underfunded. So my parents, of course, put me into a private school. So I was kind of like sort of sheltered. I would say, like 100% say I was sheltered in sort of like this like private school environment. But when but I did have friends outside, and we would discuss things, but I just never had a strong opinion. But when I got out, like when I first started voting, I decided to look into like what each part, like, because I want to see surely voting has some sort of like use. So I decided to look into like what's the optimal ways of voting, like how do you, like what party supported and things like that. And I started to understand, okay, this like I started to learn about all these different things. And then from there, I started looking to like got more involved with like understanding like news stories, understanding this like the stories behind it, and of course you stumble across YouTube videos on like how to express your ideas more. So I think for me it was lucky that we have YouTube is now more prominent compared to how it was before then. So I started to learn about like the how to push forward your points properly. Of course, like using techniques I learned in high school from my English teacher year 12. And then it kind of just kicked off from there. It's like then I started to realize that people are quite quiet with their ideas, which isn't good, because that's not a good way to progress in society. You should be sharing ideas within each other, particularly in history. Like you'll see that the reason why we had such good advancement was there's a lot of sharing of ideas and pushing things forward, and a lot of discussions. So yeah, from there it's just that same sort of pathway. It's like you start finding more diverse friends. You start sharing. You build like a group where you're not afraid to talk to each other about ideas, challenge different norms, and see like and then toy with your idea with other people. See if your idea is actually supported by other people. And then you can start learning, and you can start having debates where you start. You purposely talk to people outside your box. I think that's quite important too. Is like talk to people outside the circle that you work with, or you go to school with, or your general friendship group. And I think a lot of young people as well, who ask me as well, it's like how do you like I can't really talk to other people, and it's like about these ideas, and it's like if you can't really talk to to other people, then you should actually be actively expanding your friendship groups, or actively putting yourself into situations where you can discuss it with people completely different to you. Because that's how, and because what you can do is you'll find out if your argument is wrong. You can either rechange your values, or try and restructure your argument. So then when you come back to have another discussion with another person, they can either learn from you, or you can learn from them, or you both learn from each other, and then you both go out to to other people, and you start spreading these type of new ideas, and then you test them out that way. So I think it's a very interesting pathway how you get to that point.
Yeah, I think that's I mean, I feel like I could talk on that subject alone for hours on end, but how do you I mean, that idea of just staying open and listening and being able to respond but interested in the answer, I think that's always something. It's really hard as a human being, probably, is to sit and wait and listen to the answer.
Yeah, I think I think it's a cause of problems with a lot of things. Like it's the idea of the communication's two things. You express your idea, but you have to listen. Like you have to give that opportunity to listen to what other people have to say, because you don't realize how much information that you miss out on without just listening and shutting up and just listening to see what other people have to say, because I'll keep going on that point. I don't go too far on that, but yeah, the importance of listening is very important in this day and age.
Yeah, absolutely. So Who do you look up to most today?
That's a good
To
question.
completely change the direction of the
Yeah.
conversation.
I think because I base my values on, so I have I think I have different people I look up to for different things. So for me, it's like for hardworking, it's always been my dad, because he started off as he left year 10, went straight into apprenticeship, and it's always worked hard for all of his life. And that determination has always inspired me to do what I would do now. It's that's like working hard. It's always been my dad. For like I think engineering, it's always been like I used to love Mythbusters as a kid. I used to watch that show religiously. So guys like Adam Savage from Mythbusters has always been sort of person I would look up to in terms of like how he combined art and engineering, particularly for him because he was a set designer. Um, and also another one from Mythbusters is Grant Imahara. I think that was where I got interested in robotics, because he was actually in at I think college he was like at a point where he was sort of failing subjects, and then it wasn't until he found someone that like helped him, he sort of built himself up again and went on to do cool things. And I think for me as well, it's like, of course, when you at university, you do fail a few subjects. So like learning from him, like how he overcame, and that sort of helped me through like my university years. Um, and then it's just people in general who are passionate about things. So I really enjoy talking to people who have interesting life stories. So just there's not really one particular person, but just people in general who have interesting stories, like not famous at all, that like enjoy talking about their life experiences and are willing to share their life experiences. I value people like that quite a lot. Like that inspires me a lot because they're out there doing their thing, not making a fuss about it, and that really like it just really like people who are smart, level-headed, who like to talk about their experiences, talk about their hardships, and also willing to be open. Like just people in general like that just inspire me on a daily basis.
Yeah, you mentioned people talking about their hardships, and you also alluded to your own failures at university and things like that. How important is failure?
Oh, 100%. So, for me, I hated failing. So I just as a kid, I just did not like failing. I hated disappointing people. So like throughout school, I was like I worked hard. I think I think it's a problem with school too. It's becoming now. It's like you don't learn to fail. So like throughout high school, I was working hard, doing things like that, and then when I got into university, I did electrical engineering first. I thought that was what I wanted to do. Turns out it wasn't what I wanted to do. So when I like in my first and second year of university, that was probably the hardest thing because I was failing subjects just because I got bored, and I didn't realize I was getting bored. I was more so I was doing it because I wanted like I think I was doing it because I selected it not to stick with it. I think that's kind of a bad trait. Is like if you realize something is not going well, don't stick with it and change. But I was too proud, and I was like I did not want to seem like I was failing. So I think it came to a point at my I think my second year of uni. And it's like, nah, this is not going anywhere. I really have to sort of let go of the fact that you're never gonna actually there's gonna be failure in life, and you have to understand that there's gonna be failure in life. Um, and I like just working with my own parents, like they've experienced failure too. But I think they never shared that when I was younger. Like my mum was open to me failing things, but I just I would never tell her that I was failing things. Or I was like experiencing hardship because I just didn't want to show them that that I didn't want to disappoint them. I think that's the thing. I just didn't want to disappoint them in and show them that I'm not the good child, something like that. So yeah, in second year of high school, second year of uni, I told my parents like I'm not doing well at university. That's like for a scary moment of my life because it's like, what are they going to think? And they're like, okay, what do you want to do now? I'm like, oh, I think I want to do mechatronics engineering because I think that's better suited for me because it's more robotics rather than electrical engineering, which for me wasn't what I thought it would be. And they're like, okay, go do it. I'm like, okay, then I'm gonna go do it. So I think from that point on, I just realized there's nothing to be afraid of with failing because it actually helps you learn. So yeah, from that point on, failure was. I think failure. It doesn't. It still kind of scares me. I still don't want to fail because there's still that fear of loss. But I'm starting to learn. Like as I grow older, I'm starting to learn that failure is a very good thing. And if you can use it to your advantage to help build something new, build a new path as you grow older, it's definitely useful. So now I pass that on to young, young engineers who are like starting up at uni. I always pass on that message: is if you start to see that you're no longer doing well at something, or you're no longer having interest in something, or if you're afraid at failing, pick up on that very quickly and then see how you can change your path or move on from it or experience the failure so that you can see what's going on, like see what's going to happen. So I think also failure is a very good thing because it helps ground you very quickly because that fear and realization, you're like, oh, okay, I was over exaggerating all this time.
Yeah, I wonder if we can ever get to a point where we can get excited about failing and knowing in advance all the good things that are likely to come from it.
Yeah, I think it's also comes to the person's personality too, because like failure is very like people who really enjoy failure, also tend to be. I'm not sure. I think I was reading about this somewhere, but also tend to be quite willing to take risks. Like for me, I'm very risk averse. I've always been risk averse, but I think when you start to learn, when you start to fail a bit more and start to understand it, your chances of jumping into something new is quite high. So yeah, I definitely be very interested to see how if we all come to a point where failure is accepted. And I think it will be. It is starting to be now, like with especially with parenting as well. Parents are starting to realize it's good to let your kids fail to see what it feels like and understand how you can get over that sort of that icky feeling of failing. Yeah. So, but also in business too, like corporations not who will always stick by the rules of like this has always worked and that's it. We're not going anywhere further. It's like that's not how innovation works in the past. Like you have to take some sort of risk to see what would happen. But I think you get sort of tied up in like red tape and things like that. Like you don't want to move forward. Like you don't want to sort of break the success or break this like that good feeling that you're having at the moment.
Yeah, there's such an impetus to keep growing from what you created the last quarter, and you have to show your figures that are always growing. And I think you hear people like Simon Sinek and so forth talking about how dysfunctional that can be in innovation these days. But I think there's more and more people, discussing that kind of thing and the anti-fragility. Yeah, there's a whole raft of things going on now, I think, in that area.
I was reading, I think a year ago on, I think it was a story on why Google no longer innovates, and that was particularly interesting because it's like they were talking about how there was so much red tape around innovation at Google, that a lot of their good good workers just ended up leaving because they're tired of having to stick by the rules and stick by these set sort of things. So that's why I think that's also that's why Google just ends up buying out companies, because there's no longer they no longer risk it anymore, because it's like, oh, this company's doing well, we'll just buy them out now. It's like there's none of that joy of we're creating something new within the company, rather than just we'll just wait to see how this company turns out and just buy them out.
Yeah, I think that impetus too to just survive. If you're a little startup and you've got a problem and you want to solve it, you're like a dog with a bone trying to get ahead.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you have that sort of fear in the back of, like, you have that. Yeah, like, I think failure is good as well. Like, having a fear of failure is also very good because it keeps you going. But I think the point is, when you do fail, it's not to linger on it, and it's like to learn from it. I think that's the key thing here. So failure is good. Like, the fear of failure is good just to keep you going, but learning from failure is the most important thing. So if you can learn from it and move on and not linger, that's the biggest thing, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
There's just two final questions that we're asking everyone. The first one is, what advice do you want to give adults?
That's a good question. I think, keeping to the theme of today, I think the biggest thing I'd love to tell adults is, don't be afraid to learn something new. Like that saying, you can't teach an old dog new tricks, is not true. You can teach an old dog new tricks. I think if you're willing to be open to learning and open to taking on new ideas and open to, like, educating yourself and wanting to move forward and in life, I think it's definitely one thing I'll do, is like just be open to picking up new ideas, open to learning, open to educating yourself.
Yeah, fantastic. And what would you do if you were leading the world?
Oh,
just a small question to finish with.
If I was leading the world, I would hire people smarter than me.
Great.
Yeah, I think that's the key thing, is you're not as smart as you think you are. So I would hire people smarter than me, and then we'll sit in a room and bring in more and more people to sort of educate us as well, because we're not also the smartest people in the room.
Yeah, that takes quite a bit of humility as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. You have to step down off your high horse and actually understand that there are people smarter than you, there are people with different experiences than you, and you should definitely you should be open to all sorts of ideas.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, thanks so much, Anthony. It's incredibly informative. I think there's a number of things that I'm thinking about that I'm going to try and take into my life. I think it's just how do you hold on to all these things on a daily basis? It's really important to revisit them regularly.
100%.
Yeah.
That's good fun, actually. I quite enjoyed this.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I'm glad. Thanks so much.
All right, thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you want to find all the others, just go to your favorite platform, Young People Giving Adults Advice, and hit follow, because we'll be releasing a new episode each Wednesday. Thanks so much for your support.
This podcast has been made possible with the help of MARCHMADE Media and Leonie Tillman at English for Business.